First time I remember Pop was Nana. My mom picked us up from the babysitter with Pop, and they took us to the zoo. I don't remember being at the zoo, but I remember him telling us he was taking us to the zoo, and we were so excited, jumping all over him, and you know, I guess he won us over with that.
Okay, my favorite memory with Pop was when all my girlfriends were over here, and Pop came home when he was feeling a little bit good, and my boss was having a meeting across the street at my work, and it was a real important meeting with all the board members, and Pop kept jumping up and looking in the wind at them, and I was begging him to please stop, and he's like, "No, I'll tell you what they're saying." He kept jumping up and down in the window. That's one of my favorite memories when he made me laugh so hard that night.
He was pretty quiet to himself. He didn't really interact with us too much. When he was drinking, he would tell us his war stories, but other than that, he was pretty quiet. He liked to read a lot and stay to himself.
He was great because he was actually only your Uncle Ray Ray's biological father, and he was the stepfather of my Uncle Ray, Mike and Aunt Ruthie and your mom, and he treated them all four of them the same, equal. He was a wonderful, wonderful dad. Wouldn't have been able to raise them without Ray. What do I miss most about him? Just him coming home every night to me, making me laugh. That's what I miss most about him.
He had a great sense of humor, even up until almost the end, a couple of days before he couldn't talk anymore. He was still cracking jokes with the nurses, with us. Everything was a joke. He constantly laughing.
I took care of him. I took care of him. I took him to his doctor's appointments. I gave him all his medicines. I took care of him. That's how I supported him. I told him it was all going to be okay, but it wasn't. But
like the last conversation we had together, he was saying that he's going to have a second chance at life, and he wants to do good by us, and he was apologizing that he wasn't a great father or a good role model. And I told him, I said, look, we all turned out to be good kids. We're all good adults. I said, you did the best you could. I said, and you know, you're doing fine. Don't worry about that.
we would have been married 30 years, July 4th, and our relationship was very, very, very strong. Very strong.
He was an alcoholic, and he wound up with cirrhosis of the liver, and he was diagnosed 2 years before he passed away. He told us that he had cirrhosis of the liver, but he didn't want us involved in his care whatsoever. He wanted to do it independently. And then when he started getting towards the end stages, the ammonia level in his body kept escalating, and it was making him confused. So he really couldn't resist us anymore. You know, we stepped in to help, and we were there, and towards the end, his kidneys were doing all the work for his liver as well, and they just were an overload, and they wound up failing.
Now the last 2 weeks, Pop was very, very sick. His blood pressure was down. He couldn't eat by himself. He couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. He couldn't do nothing for himself. So we knew it was time to send him to heaven. And so we all sat around the table, talked about it, and we said, okay, send him away. It was very hard, but it was also a relief because he was very much in pain, and I know that he wanted to go, and I knew it was best for him. I didn't want him to suffer no more.
You know, it's family. You do it, and he was was a pleasure. The one thing about being there with him every day for the last 2 weeks of his life, I didn't know it, but we were having closure. Because we at the time thought he was going to be getting a new liver and starting a new life, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But being there those last 2 weeks was actually a time where we probably bonded the most that we ever did in our lives, and we actually were getting closure. I was saying goodbye to him, we just didn't know it. While he was still alive, we did everything we possibly could for him. And at the end, he did not want dialysis, a ventilator, any machines, but we gave it to him anyway for a couple days because we had to at least try. But after 5 days, we said, we know this isn't what he wants. And he actually looked at the machines and he shook his head no, he was done. And Nana even said, "You don't want this anymore?" And he said no. So we had to let him go. His body would have never responded. If he would have came home from the hospital, he would have been back in the hospital probably a few days later, and this would have ended. So I think that we fought a good fight, and him passing away was a peaceful thing. I mean, it wasn't unexpected. We knew it was coming, so it wasn't that hard to deal with. It's sad you're never going to see him again or hear his voice, but it was okay with the decision that we made.
Well, that was when he was in the hospital, and I told him he better smile at me because you smiled at your mother. Or he smiled rather at Aunt, I don't know if it was your mom or Aunt Ruthie, but he smiled at them and made a face at me. So I told him, no, you better smile at me, and he did. That was my last conversation with him. I probably didn't overcome it yet, because I just probably hasn't really hit me still yet, because I can't believe like each day I'm doing okay. But so I just know I'm overcome it by knowing that he is in a better place and he's not suffering anymore. That helps a lot. I know God's on my side.